Hi, and welcome to Lights of the Roundtable. My name's Susanna, and I'm very pleased to have with us today a very special guest. Her name is Amy Williams. You probably heard about her. She is known as the Hope Dealer. And why is that? Is because she's not your typical inspirational figure. She's someone who's walked the gritty streets of urban America, extending a hand of hope where despair often reigns. And that's really very important for the kids that she has been helping out for some time, kids that are in gangs and kids who are imprisoned. And what's her approach to all of this? Well, it's to see others as God might see them, full of value, potential, and deserving of a second chance. And boy, do I think that is a great message for our youth. Welcome, Amy Williams.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you. That was a great introduction.
Hey,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It took me a little bit to write, but I'll tell you, your story is very inspirational.
Yeah.
For many, many reasons. I mean, you've been doing this for 30 years, I believe.
30 years. Has been quite a journey. It has been up and down. It's been a roller coaster. It's been great. It's been hard. It's been all the things that come with doing life with young people.
But what inspired you? I mean, tell us a little bit about your story. What draw you to deal with what we would consider tough kids in the gangs, in the hoods? I mean, and we're talking now Chicago. I don't know if you've worked in other places. I know that your hub is in Chicago. I don't know if you've been to New York, but I'll tell you, those neighborhoods are rough. And I've walked in New York by the Bronx, a little bit in some tough neighborhoods that you know, what can I say? A flat tire, and I'll tell you, one is praying for their lives.
Right. No, exactly. These are very it's kind of like the love-hate relationship. They're beautiful. Chicago is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And then you go deeper into the city and see how people are living and seeing the poverty and seeing the racism and seeing just the under-resourced communities. It can be just as heartbreaking. Still beautiful, but heartbreaking. And so working in Chicago over the last 20 years, prior to that, I was in North Carolina. Prior to that, I was born and raised in Maine. So I'm kind of a New England girl, a little country girl living in the city. And what got me involved in working with youth in the gang culture and in the justice system really was my baby brother, who was my absolute best friend. He himself was involved in gangs. He himself was involved in and out of the criminal justice system. And he was my best friend. And it was at a time when there was absolutely nothing I could do to help him because I was a teenager myself. So now that I'm of the age and I'm older, connected and have resources, I can help young people that are just like him, that have found themselves in that same space. And I've always been a cheerleader for the underdog. So, and then God told me to do it. So here I am.
Well, can I ask you, from a country girl to a city girl? And then you mentioned your brother. Did he grow up in where you guys were living in a difficult neighborhood, or what drew him? What drew him?
I mean, because there's not gang culture in Maine, right?
Right.
But he actually moved to Los Angeles. So as a teenager. And so we know the story of Los Angeles in the 80s and the 90s, the whole gang culture, the blood versus the Crips, the crack era, mass incarceration started. I mean, all of these different things going on in the city of Los Angeles. So that's where he learned of gang culture, where he learned about being in and out of the system, and it just became a part of his journey.
So there's one part that I researched. Here you are having a successful, quote unquote, successful career. in a sense that you didn't have to live, in a tough neighborhood, and you decide to move to the tough neighborhood of Chicago. Why?
Yeah. Because I'm crazy. I mean, I relocated to Chicago from North Carolina due to divorce and the death of my 7-year-old niece, who was like my daughter. Needing to change, needing to start again. In Chicago, I had a lot of friends. My family's from Chicago. My dad was was raised in Chicago. So I had a lot of connections. And even when I moved to Chicago, I moved to a very nice neighborhood. But as I began doing the work of ministry, God just laid it on my heart to step down from being a youth pastor with working with kids that grew up in the church, because that's not my DNA. I wanted to be in the streets, in the courtrooms, in the jails. Like, that's where I wanted to be. And the church wasn't going in that direction. We'll put it nicely. And God asked me to move into a gang neighborhood. And so I didn't say yes right away. I had a lot of questions for him. But it just all came down to him saying, I just need you to be a light in these kids' darkness. He said, that's my neighborhood. Those are my people. I didn't abandon them. And I'm not asking you to go and save them. That's my job. What I'm asking you to do is to walk life with these young people and be a light in their darkness. And for these kids, they need you there. They don't need someone who's living outside and coming into the neighborhood. And it moved it from being they and them to we and us. So now I became a fabric of the community that they grew up in, and we were in it together.
Did it take them a long time to, I guess, did you have to earn their respect?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that goes for any young person, right? Anybody that does this work of youth ministry, it takes a young person's permission to be able to have the privilege of being in their life. So I don't care if you're black, white, rich, poor, in the hood, in the suburbs, every young person, it takes a level of trust that you have to earn in order to be in their life. And so with these kids at a whole other level, maybe it takes a little longer. It looks different. But for some of the kids, they just automatically just gravitated towards me. So the trust was already set from the jump. The fact that I just moved into the neighborhood meant something. But for the other kids, they were like, are you an undercover police officer? Are you a turn or burn pastor? Like, what is your motive? What is your intention? And with those young people, yeah, it did take time. I had one incident that's in my book where one of the young people robbed me. A young person that I was ministering to, that I loved, that I opened my house to, literally robbed me while I went to go see a movie. And that, having the conversation with him after that, which we really still haven't had a conversation because he tried to hide from me and then got arrested for robbing somebody else's house. But a lot of the young people at that point were like, are you staying or are you going? And when I said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying right here in this neighborhood, that opened up another level of trust that those young people had with me. So, yeah, you have to earn their trust. And sometimes it takes a minute and sometimes it takes years.
So how do you approach those kids? I mean, I guess, do you do this on a one-on-one or do you actually have groups? Or how does it work in that neighborhood? How does it work? How do you work?
When I lived in that neighborhood, I literally would just get up and pray and ask God to lead me for that day. And I would just walk the neighborhood. Sometimes I would drive over there. Not over there. Most of the kids were 2 streets from me. But I had a lot of kids that were on the same street as me. So sometimes it was just a matter of putting a chair in front of my house and just sitting there for hours and talking to kids as they were hanging out or walking by. I would have fresh brownies. I would have lemonade for them. Um, Sometimes it was just that simple. And kids want somebody to talk to and somebody to see them and somebody that will open up or someone they can open up to. Other times I would just drive around. I would take them to play basketball, bring them food, take them to school, drive them to court, like whatever that meant, whatever that looks like. And it started with a relationship with one kid. And that one kid introduced me to all the other kids. That's all I needed was an introduction. After that, consistency, presence, and showing up.
What about the
And I'd be
parents?
like, "Oh, Alejandro, I met you yesterday. How you doing today?" You know, the consistency, but it started with one kid. That's all it took.
No good. But what about the parents? How did they
The
look up
parents,
to
I mean,
you?
if the parents were out on the block, I would hang out with them. I would sit on their porches. Um, Sometimes the parents would call me and be like, "I can't take my boy to the court. Can you take him?" So it was a family thing, right? Not just the kids, but the parents would see me around all the time, and they would want to know who I was. So, and why are you taking my boy to play basketball? And why do I always see you on the block talking to him? And so it just became they were my neighbors. They were my neighbors, and we would have long conversations over Pepsi, or they'd have a beer or a glass of wine or whatever it was. Yeah, it was a family affair as well.
Well, what about violence, Amy? I mean, did you ever witness any drive-bys? Unfortunately, we hear a lot of those stories. Did you
Yeah,
ever witness lost kids along the way? And I'm sure.
absolutely, absolutely. Was involved near a drive-by while I was hanging out with kids on the block. A car just kind of came and just started shooting. I didn't tell my mom or my dad that because they like had wanted me to leave Chicago for the long. My brother too. Nobody likes me here in Chicago doing the work that I'm doing. But yeah, lots of violence, drugs, crime. I mean, you can't be involved with young people at this level and not be exposed to that kind of activity, right? And so I'm in double digit numbers of young people that I've buried. Um, I think that's been the hardest part out of all of this, has been
Wow.
burying the young people that I've loved, poured into, or just for them to be taken by senseless gun violence. It just
Is it really that
sometimes
senseless?
it
Amy, I'm
is.
sorry. Is it really just
Yeah.
drive by and just out of for the fun just start shooting? Is that how it
Yeah.
is?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. It's gang against gang. It's not person against person. So sometimes a lot of it's not targeted. It's like, you killed one of our gang members, we're going to kill one of yours. Wherever we can find them, it doesn't matter if there are kids around. Doesn't matter if it's one of a church. You took one of our guys, we're going to take one of yours. And so to me, that's senseless. I'm trying to think, like, every young person that I buried, except for one that I can think of, he was the target, but everybody else was just happened to be in a space with their friends, and just happened to they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I guess that's one way you could put it.
Yeah. How have
That
you
is
been?
senseless.
It is senseless. Has it changed in the last few years? Is it more, less? I mean, you've been in Chicago this long. I'm sure
Yeah.
that it's been some years harder. I guess numbers go up. Other
Yeah.
years
It's a
numbers
roller
go down.
coaster.
How
Yeah,
about
it's a
so
roller
in the last?
coaster. We in Chicago, it has gone down, but it's on the uptick. It during 2020 had an impact, and so it went down. But then as soon as everybody was back out on the streets, they went up. Money's going into under-resourced communities, so it's starting to go down. But then summer hits and it goes up. There are all these treaties, and if someone violates the treaty, so then the numbers start going up. we've had a work in a community called named Little Village, and they have seen a decrease in the last 2 years, but the last couple of months it started going up again. So it's one of those things where spikes don't really matter. If one kid is shot in a year, that's too many. If one is killed in a year and nobody else, that's still one kid too many. So yeah, it's a roller coaster, and we just try to do what we can with what we have at the time with that particular community.
Well, I don't know how you do it, Amy. I really don't.
And God, like God, that's it. That's the whole God and my community of friends and support. There is no way that I could be doing this for 30 years unless, one, I was passionate about it. I love these kids to death. God has called me to this work, and I have people that, now don't get me wrong, there have been a lot of times where I've been like, I'm done. It's a wrap. I'm moving to Puerto Rico. I'm going to hang out on the island. Like, don't call me. And I needed that gentle reminder from God and from my friends. But this is what I am most passionate about and what I know that I'm created to do. And it looks different every season. I just have to be faithful, right? And so I think Mother Teresa had a quote that was like, we don't have to do great, big, large things. We just have to be faithful. And so I'm just trying to be faithful to God and to my call and to the young people that I serve.
And how many kids have you changed their course in life? And what are they doing now? Is that how you got your title? I mean,
the hope dealer. Yeah.
Hope dealer.
So the hope dealer to the dope dealer. So they sling dope and I sling hope. It's there's a gentleman named Wordsmith who came up with the phrase neighborhood hope dealer. And I remember talking to the kids about him. He's a rap artist or something, a Christian rap artist. And they were like, that's you, Miss Amy, you're a hope dealer. And I was like, I'm taking that name on. So everywhere I go, I mean, I have my hope dealer t-shirt on right now.
Love it. I mean, what a way to motivate kids. So what are so we talked about the challenges and some of your stories. What are your successes?
Oh man.
I'm sure you have an anecdote. You can't give me one of those anecdotes that everybody would love to hear.
I really wish that I did. I mean, I've worked with kids all over the country, right? So I have young people in LA and Boston, Worcester, North Carolina, Florida, Chicago, like everywhere. And success is a relative term, honestly. Because success could be for one of my kids who's on parole that he didn't drop 30, which means he passed his drug test, right? That could be huge for a kid who was on the street, addicted to heroin, addicted to weed, and his parole officer is like, wow, you're clean. That's huge. We've had young people who've gone off to college. That's huge. Young people who have come home from prison and are dads and have decided, I can't do this gang life anymore because I have a child, and they start a family. That's huge. So success, I mean, I'm thankful that I don't have to measure success by a grant who's like, we need numbers. Success is just for me when young people decide to live healthy lives and are working on themselves. And so I have a lot of young people that are there, but I have a lot of young people that have a long way to go.
Amy, has your neighborhood changed? I mean, since you at the neighborhood where you has it changed to the positive? I mean, have you been able, at least the neighborhood that you started in Chicago, has the hood improved? I guess that's my question. Life, the quality of life, because of your influence, because of your support, because of the hope that you give to the kids, that they actually start to understand that they're valuable individuals and that God cares.
I mean, I would like to think so. The neighborhood that I was a part of is being gentrified. So I got gentrified out of that community along with a lot of my young people. So now the young people in that particular community are all over the place now because of gentrification. So to me, gentrification is never a good thing because it just displaces families and puts them in other under resourced communities. But I would like to think more of the impact being in their lives as opposed to the neighborhood itself, the community itself. Um, the individual young people that I can follow and see that they're doing well, then the hopes will be that they will impact their communities that they live in. I'm hoping the block was a little better. I recently heard from one of the kids that I haven't talked to in years, and he reached out to me because he needs community service. And he was just like, I've never thanked you for all the stuff that you did for us when we were kids. And he was like, you're the real one, like for real. And I was like, really? I was like, I didn't know if it mattered. And he was like, it mattered a lot. So just to hear that, I don't always get to see the impact. I just hope and pray for it. So I'm the seed planter and God has to do the rest.
Yeah, I can see that. Boy, what a work and what a compliment from, your fellow, I guess, friends, youth,
I was like, don't make me cry.
What about now? Not only did you spend time in the hood, but also you spend a lot of time going to the prisons. What was that like? And I'm sure that some of these kids, with due respect, they were probably there for the wrong reasons, maybe for that. So psychologically, it takes a toll at that age. What kind of, how did you work and help them out through that time?
Yeah, so we know that prisons don't work for young people.
They don't. That's why I'm asking
They
you.
don't. It creates trauma. It creates trauma on top of the trauma they already have as their brain is beginning to develop. They're very dark places, very cold places. And so one of the things that I have the privilege to do in my full-time work is that I bring restorative justice programming into 3 juvenile prisons. And through that, we get to do art and music and writing and peace circles, several other different types of classes. But we use those classes as tools to build relationships with the young people. So we get to know them, we become mentors to them. And then when they come home, we walk with them as they try to figure out how to integrate back into society. So it's a whole process, right? It's not just going into prison and doing a Bible study and then leaving. It is really about becoming part of their lives, becoming family to them, and then becoming family to us. So we spend a lot of time in the prison, loving on them, walking with them, figuring it out, giving them a safe space. And I just recently saw Father Greg Boyle came to talk with our ministry, who was with Homeboy Industries. And he just asked, like, how do you do it? What do you do to make a difference in the prison? And I think one of the biggest things is that when I'm there, the kids know that I'm excited to see them. So I will call them by name. I will give them a hug, which I'm not supposed to, but I do anyway, because they don't get hugs, right? I'm the auntie. I'm the big sis. We sit down. We have conversations. I acknowledge them. I see them. I validate their existence and their humanity, because the prisons try to remove that humanity from them, take away their dignity. And I'm going to be the one that restores that and keeps it going and lets them know that I value them, that there are people out here praying for them and loving on them. So it's, I get a lot of joy going to the prison because there's some great kids in there, and some of the kids need to be in there. They've done things that they shouldn't have done. But that's just not the place for them. There need to be community alternatives to incarceration, other ways to deal with that, that's more restorative and less punitive, that's causing more trauma.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you, because I think that the whole problem is not having community outreach resources for them. It's really the implementation of those programs are not conducive to restore the young individuals. I
Exactly.
mean, it's
Exactly.
that's what it is. It's not. I mean, they have they get all these federal fundings for state funds, and they do absolutely nothing to actually uplift and do what they need to do in order to restore these young minds and just young kids. I mean,
Exactly.
so I guess, how do you do it? How do you approach to them, or how do they learn to love themselves? I think that's one of the basics, because I think that their whole self-confidence is shut down. It's amazing. I was looking at one of your interviews with one of your friends, and one of the things that shocked me is, for example, at the Hoods, all they care and all they're dreaming about is their funeral day, and what it's going to look like, and how many flowers and how much gold and who is going to be there. I mean, and what kind of
Yeah.
casing they're going to be in, and what
They plan for their funerals, not their futures.
You know how hard that is for I guess moms to know that their kids out there, just instead of looking forward to a wedding, they're looking forward to a funeral. It's not why you were born for, to be. You're to be here to live life to the fullest. And yes, we all make mistakes, but that's part of the learning. So I guess,
and I think that it's what Father Greg Boyle calls the lethal absence of hope. You can drive around in these communities and feel, like, tangibly feel the presence of the lack of hope. You can drive from one neighborhood, and then it starts looking nice, and you feel a lift and hope, and go right back to a certain neighborhood and just feel the heaviness of it. And so the lethal absence of hope. If people don't have hope, then what they do doesn't matter. They don't care. And most of my young people find themselves surviving. They're not thinking about the future. They're thinking about the moment.
right.
They're thinking about the moment and how can I get through this? How can I find my next meal? Where am I going to sleep tonight? How do I avoid being shot? I can't go pick up my sister at her school because it's in a rival gang neighborhood. How am I going to be able to feed her tonight? My dad is in jail. My dad has never been around. My mom has 3 jobs because she's trying to take care of us. So I never see her. We're undocumented, so we don't have any resources that we can go to because you have to have a social security card. I mean, so many reasons to not have hope when you're just trying to survive. You're just trying to survive.
But I think the key is, how do you resonate the word of God with kids who are in that mindset? They don't have time for God. Excuse me.
No, they don't. They give God the middle finger because they're just kind of like, what are you doing for me? Look at where I live. Look at my community. Look at how dirty it is. Look how the houses are boarded up. They got the red X's on the windows. Like, yeah, how do we? And the way we do that is not by preaching the gospel, it's by being the gospel, right? So it's about being there, being present, being in those spaces, and being consistent in that. I have a gang leader, and I think you might have read it in the book, who talk about community, the churches that come to do one-day block parties. And he's like, yeah, y'all can come into our neighborhood. And that's how he said, first of all, our neighborhood. So they don't even see you as part of the neighborhood. You can come into our neighborhoods. We'll eat your hot dogs. We'll drink your drinks. We'll do your bouncy houses. But it doesn't really make a difference because you won't be back until next year. How do you have real community impact if you're only there once a year? And young people need consistency. They need stability. They need to see, they say 90% of ministry is showing up, and it's showing up again, and it's showing up again. Sometimes you show up with a pizza, just walk around the block. Sometimes you just show up. You put a seat on the corner. You have some pizza or whatever else kids like. You're just a presence. And so I think a lot of communities can start there. I know it sounds simple. You can open up your church more than just Wednesdays and Sundays. I mean, We could be on here forever with ways that we can help communities. I can talk to you forever about the little things that people can do to help their communities and help young people. But the
Well,
point is, you have to know that there's a need out there and that God has called us to meet that need.
exactly. So when you moved to the hood, was your
Yeah.
house open for everybody? Did
Mine was, that was the problem. That was the problem. That's why I got robbed. So after that, I was like, whoa, let me put some boundaries up here, right? I mean, you can have your house open with boundaries, right?
Of course.
People, and it doesn't mean you open up your
But
house.
Amy, you see, that's my point. My point is that you have all these community outreach resources out there, and they only do there for evaluations. They go to write up their write-ups and charge,
Yep.
their
Yep.
Medicaid, Medicare, whatever program there is, whatever. They're your case managers, your typical case managers, that
Yeah.
they're only doing their job, and that's it. Maybe they'll extend a hand or two. But that's it. They do not live there. They do not engage. And I
Nope.
think that's the problem. And sometimes, like you say, even having a church in the block, the priest or the minister or the pastor is not there, all the time. It's just opening up the doors for the sermon and
their
then
members.
closing, and that's it. And then that's it. So
Yep. There were 5 churches on this block. And I went to every single church to ask them to help me reach these kids. And I got the door closed in my face every time.
you're kidding
I'm
me.
like, 5 churches on one block, one little block. And I could not get anybody to help me return my phone calls, open up a parking lot, let us use it for basketball. I mean, nothing. And there were 5, one mega church. And I just couldn't get anybody to help. So,
But Amy,
I
come
think
on, you
begins-
probably did. You probably did after a while. They realized it, right? Did they help you? No? All those during that time?
I was there for 6, 7 years. Nope.
Really?
I mean, after a while, I just gave up because I was just like, nobody's going to want to help me. And the kids knew that. They saw that. And they saw that I was making efforts.
Well, what
So
a
I literally
hypocrite.
had outside churches that would come in and help.
Wow, that's so
That I would
hypocrite.
take them to. Yeah. Yeah. I write a little bit about that in my book, and about a church that came into the neighborhood in a van and picked up kids. And you'll have to read the rest of the book to find out what happened and the phone call that I had with their youth pastor.
Yeah, I bet. So, yes, you do have a book, and the book is called Worth Seeing, Viewing Others Through God's Eyes. Yes. I tell you, you do talk the walk and walk the talk, if that's the idiom. I always get them wrong, my American idioms. That's what happens when you grow up in different parts, and then you pick a few
Right,
pieces
exactly.
here and there, right? So, what I want to also talk about, or at least a little bit, is that you are also a eloquent speaker. You've been at the breakfast prayers for several years. You're well known internationally. How does, when addressing, I guess, respected leaders, international leaders, and it's your turn to talk, how do you resonate with them? What happens? Are you able to open up doors to serve other kids through that venue?
So what I have found works for me, and the DNA that God has created in me, is I tell the stories. I am a natural storyteller. I feel like stories connect people. Stories touch the heart. And then the stories are the voices of my young people that can't necessarily speak. So I'll share my experiences with them. Even in the book, I begin by saying, I've never been in a gang, and I've never been in prison, and I don't speak on behalf of anybody. These are my stories, my experiences with these young people. So all I can do is share my stories of what it's been like with young people. And that connects people, that draws people, that takes them out of their head and brings them to their heart, right? So that's normally how the conversations will begin.
Have you ever
Is,
have you
is,
been able to make an impact politically to affect these kids in a better way?
so we do a lot of advocacy, but I have found that's not really my lane. My lane would be to walk with somebody who does do the advocacy and share the stories so that they can go in front of political whatever, whoever, and say, this is Amy. Let her tell the story of Kikito, who was just killed because this, and this. Or here's the story of Thomas, who's been locked up for 6 years, and this is what he needs while he's inside. So my real lane that I try to stick in is the frontline work, and let those that have a heart for advocacy to change things and change systems to let them do that, because I definitely can't do it all.
Right. So if there's an advice as an advisor, what are three things that you would change in the system to make it a success story for kids? So it would be a more successful program, I guess. We all have to. What are three things that you would do? Because obviously the system is broken.
Yeah, the first thing, the system is broken, and it didn't get there overnight. And we are trying to in Illinois create a restorative culture. So that would be the first thing that I would say is stop all the punitive measures, procedures, all of those things, and make it more restorative and in ways that young people can heal. I would say you need to include the family more, because our young people on the inside here, I'm not sure otherwise, but they are doing therapy. They meet with counselors. They meet with a bunch of different types of people that can help them as they journey through their incarceration and their walk home. But they need to include the families more, because these young people are going home and they're going back to their families. So even if they have become transformed on the inside, nothing on the outside has become transformed. How could they do that? So, and then we've been able to create, myself and another gentleman, we were able to change their policy around allowing those that have a background to come inside. And my thing is the people that can most impact our young people are those that have lived those lives and have survived it and have come out of it. So they need to go on the inside and talk to young people. So being able to get their background clear that they can do that. More prisons need to be able to have what they call credible messengers to be able to go back inside and talk to and mentor these young people. So I don't know if that's what you were asking for, but those are kind of areas that I would love to see change in the juvenile justice system.
How many juveniles are there right now in Chicago? Do you know?
So we go to St. Charles, Warrenville, and Chicago. So we're in 3 prisons within a 1.5 hour distance. I think total in Illinois is like 250 kids in 5 different prisons. In the jail, there's about 300 kids. So hopefully, as they're in jail and they meet with the judge, there are other forms of alternatives of dealing with their crime if they're found guilty, like house arrest or community interventions, those kind of things that are sending them to the prison. But the numbers seem low, and it's a lot lower. When we first started, there were 99 kids in one of the prisons. Now they're down to like 28. So we've definitely seen reform, and we've definitely seen changes in the justice system as they're trying to, again, become more restorative, allowing more efforts for healing and dealing with trauma. And
your last advice, I guess, for the people, what can one do to avoid a a young mind and a young kid to get involved. But I guess, in violence, it's a little hard of a question because it depends on the dynamics of a family.
I mean, it totally depends on the dynamics of the family,
Right.
right? But I will say one of the best things you can do is to have your kids have a mentor, have your kids assigned to a big brother, bring a whole community of support around that child, around that family. Invest in schools. The churches can adopt schools and help teachers and do tutoring. I mean, they determine how many prisons they're going to build based off of 3rd and 4th grade reading scores. So if you can, as a
Really?
church, go in and tutor 3rd graders how to read, you're impacting the justice system with never having met an inmate before. So many things you can do.
What? Tell me, no way. So they go and do a statistical research on kids, and they can build, and they have everything programmed. If they don't know how to read,
prisons based on 3rd and 4th grade reading scores, reading and math scores.
But Amy, that you see that Common Core ideology back a few years is what propelled much of what's going on then, because that's exactly what they don't want you to do, is to learn.
Exactly.
So obviously they degrade the educational system here in the United States so they can build more prisons and more chaos.
Because you can make a lot more money off of an incarcerated body than an educated one. They invest in prisons. I mean, people need to watch 13 and The House I Live In. I think they're both on Netflix. That will tell you more about the justice system and how we got to where we are today as far as incarceration. But with young people, from kindergarten to 3rd grade, they're learning how to read. From 4th grade on, they're reading to learn. And so if you don't know how to read, there's no way you can learn. If you can't learn, then you're going to eventually fail or drop out. And what happens if you fail or drop out? You're more than likely to be involved in the justice system in some sort of way. Yeah.
Wow.
School to prison pipeline, research school to prison pipeline.
Wow, what a message. Well, I hope that anybody that is listening over there will be engaged a little bit more in an educational system here in the United States and our kids in our communities, because what a slap on reality I think that is, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's very important with this upcoming election, with Trump wanting to shut down the Department of Education. So how will that also impact and affect the education system and the justice system as well? So there are bigger things to also, think about. But education is an indicator of incarceration.
Right. Well, I think the power is to educate our kids. It's just having a better program, and not one that would be a failing one. And I think that I tell you, the education department has done poorly over the years, and I think probably the effect of trying to close it is probably to shut it down, is probably to come and bring something much better that would actually propel the innovation that we need in this country. We're going to compete in the future against other countries, and be that pillar of hope, freedom, and faith that we always wanted. So I think that we have to restore that somehow.
We have to fix it. Yes.
A lot is at stake, that's for sure. Well, Amy, really, thank you so much. It's been actually quite an eye-opener for a few of us. What a way. I don't know how you survive. I mean, not only did you work in the ghettos and in the hoods, but you survived. I commend you for that.
Thank you.
Really, you are the hope dealer. What can I say?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening.
And then anybody can go to your website, which is, what is the website?
It is ahopedealer.org. So you can find videos and all kinds of fun stuff on there, as well as if you'd like me to come speak or train your church as well. Yeah.
And your book, of course.
The book, of course.
And of course, but
you'll find that on Amazon as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Same to you.